Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey.
So we're
We're presenting on the golden toad. Yep. Okay. Here's a quick video that kind of highlights some facts about this species, if it loads. Well, it was loaded.
Lulu, stop. Lulu.
Okay. Love the music on that. Oh,
Yes. Oh,
don't know what that is.
just click OK.
Okay. I want to.
Can you see the screen again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oops. There.
Okay. So for the description, so as you could tell from the video that they showed you, the male and the female are totally different. And if you didn't know anything about the golden toad, you probably would think they were two different species of toad. And so this is a great example of sexual dimorphism. And so as you can see on the slide, I have the picture of the male and the female. And so the male is generally smaller than the female. It usually is around 41 to 48 micrometers, and then the female is around 47 to, I believe, 54. Yeah, 54. And then they both, so one key characteristic to show that it's a toad versus not a frog is that it has the parotoid glands that can be seen like behind the eyes. And then like stated in the video, it has a long acute snout, which is the male, which is another characteristic to show that it's a male. And then both of them generally have smoother skin. They do have warts, but they generally have smoother skin. And also you can kind of see in this photo, but the male limbs usually are a little bit more proportionate to the body, so they're a little bit longer versus the female. And then also the diet is unknown because, of course, this toad is extinct, so there wasn't a lot that was known because when they found it versus when it became extinct was a kind of a shorter period. But the diet is very unknown, but most toads in their family tend to eat small invertebrates, and so generally they were thought to have eaten small invertebrates. And so their habitat, again, like stated in the video, it's native to the cloud forest area. So that's the Monteverde Cloud Forest Preserve, which is in the more northern part of Costa Rica. And specifically the Elfin Cloud Forest is where they can be found, where the annual temperatures are around 12 to 18 degrees Celsius. They have a pretty high annual rainfall of greater than 4,000. And then their elevation is higher, obviously, where it's ranging from 2,000 to 2,100 meters. And then with cloud forests, they definitely have distinct wet and dry seasons, even though with it being a cloud forest, it tends to be a little bit more wet. And then, so overall, they just are very specific in their habitat, being in more of like a lower montane rainforest life zone that we've talked about in previous classes.
So for reproduction, their mating season was in late March to April, which is the wet season of the cloud forest. Their last documented breeding episode was in that time in 1987. And so basically the males and the females, they gather in small pools, that small temporary pools that were created from the wet season. And during this time, males are extremely aggressive, but I think that this is due to the ratio, and males outnumber females by 8 to 1. So there's a lot of competition, which I think is why they're so aggressive in this time. For their reproductive style, they use amplexus. So this is a type of external fertilization where the female releases the egg and then the male fertilizes them. However, physical contact is still necessary, which makes it different than other methods of external fertilization. The eggs are placed in the small pools that they gathered in, and they usually take up to 5 weeks to fully metamorphosize. And yes, a mating will produce over 200 to 400 eggs. Go to the next one. So I read an article that said that the behavior of the golden toad can be linked to a species called Bufo holdrendigae, and this is because it was also a phosphorreal species, so it also spent an extended period underground, and it has a lot of phenological similarities, and it also exhibited the same reproductive behaviors, and yeah, such as egg size and clutch size. So yeah.
So the distribution of the golden toad, it was only found in the Monteverde cloud forest because it was endemic to that area. and I mean, there's not really current distribution, then the status is extinct. So in 1989, there was only one male toad that was spotted, and then by the next year, the species was extinct. But then the ICUN declared it extinct in 2004. Yeah, and currently it is extinct. So, um, I kind of had a question after reading that, like why it only inhabited this small area. But everything that I read just talked about how the species was endemic to the elfin cloud forest. And just for like reference, like endemic is just like native and restricted to like one certain place. And then reading about the elfin cloud forest, it's like a very uncommon ecosystem that's found at high like elevations, and so it just like provides like a very specific habitat, which is why the species only like existed there.
As far as threats and conservation problems go, when the toad went extinct, a lot of scientists were confused as to why, and there were a lot of theories going around. So some scientists thought that it was because of abnormally high UV radiation levels. Other scientists blame it on droughts or like different pH of breeding pools. Eventually, scientists came to the general consensus that the dry and hot conditions caused by the 1986 and 1987 El Nino were a part of the cause, but it was not the full explanation because the El Nino caused the breeding pools to appear earlier that year because they resulted in wet conditions earlier than they normally would have been. And so when the toads laid their eggs, the pools ended up drying out before the eggs could hatch, and that explains what happened to like the young population and to the baby tadpoles, but it didn't really explain what had happened to all of the adults. You can go to the next slide. And so what scientists ended up discovering was that there was a fungus going around that was highly contagious, and the dry conditions had limited the toad's area of inhabitants even more than it was already limited. And since the fungus was so contagious, it was able to spread to all of the toads. And what the fungus did was it was a skin disease that would cover their pores and stuff and eventually result in death. And so overall, like the scientists ended up concluding that the disease did ravage the toad's population, and part of that was because of the effects of El Nino and the climate conditions that were so abnormal.
And yeah, along with like conservation, since it was such an like it was such a sudden onset of decline, there wasn't really a whole lot they could do about it because like by the time they realized the species was declining, like it was gone the next year. But like afterwards, they expanded the area of like the Monteverde cloud forest, an additional 100 acres. The Rainforest Trust did that, and that kind of helps to conserve other similar species. But like I said, like that happened after the golden toad was extinct, so it didn't really help them much.
That being said, though, although the golden toad couldn't be saved, there were other local grassroots movements and like conservation groups that emerged as a result, and the golden toad ended up becoming a really big like climate change icon. Um, so a lot of policies have been put into place in order to help protect other vulnerable species in order to prevent their extinctions as well.
And then we just had some concluding remarks, just kind of like highlighting everything that we discussed so far. Just that the golden toad inhabited that very small area in the Monteverde cloud forest. And even though like it used to be abundant in its habitat, it faced like a sharp decline in just a couple of years due to the extreme environmental conditions and the contagious fungus. In 1990, it went extinct and remains extinct on the IUCN list. And then its former habitat has been expanded to help conserve other species, but again, that was done after it was extinct. And then we kind of just came up with some questions that we thought the classmates might ask if we were presenting it to them. So the first one was, what do you think could have been done to prevent this species extinction?
So that question is kind of difficult to answer because the extinction was so sudden and so unexpected. I think that in order to prevent the extinction, it would have like taken a lot of predictions on the part of scientists and stuff in order for them to know that the El Nino would have been so bad with like the greenhouse effect and CO2 levels being increased in the atmosphere. But even with that, they couldn't really have predicted that there would have been a fungus that would have spread throughout the entire population and like decimated their numbers. So all in all, like there's really not a lot that could have been done to prevent the extinction.
And then for the second one, it's just how can we apply what we've learned from this species to better conserve similar species?
I think that's like kind of been done a lot already, as you can see from like one of our previous slides where it said that like they've used this toad as kind of like a face of like trying to get like against climate change and stuff like that, and basically using it more of like as an example as to what could happen with other amphibians, and the potential risks that a lot of different species are at nowadays with climate change and other things like deforestation and the fungus, and just there's many different types of issues that they can have. So being able to learn like the potential issues that happened with El Nino and stuff like that, and applying that to trying to save other species.
And then the last one was just why is it important to work to conserve amphibian species such as the golden toad?
I feel like throughout our entire course, we've been learning about how biodiversity is important and how it's like something that we need to maintain, but also like amphibians play an important role in ecosystems with like just eating insects and stuff, and they're definitely like a major part of the food chain and food web. So obviously it's important to conserve them.
Anyone
So
want to
yeah,
add anything?
I guess, okay, we're excited.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're
That concludes our presentation.
Okay, bye.